Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cashflow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is real estate expert George McCleary. Now, George is a real estate investor and social media influencer who shot to fame after a viral video demonstrated just how easy it is to steal a house. Now, in this video, stole a house, George revealed the loopholes that squatters and title thieves use to manipulate the system. Now, George is the CEO of Defender Networks, which is based in Portland, Oregon. And George ultimately leads a company focused on safeguarding clients from squatters, title fraud, and other real estate scams, which we're going to talk all about today. And so, guys, without further ado, I'd like to welcome George McCleary to the show. George, my friend, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Kevin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to have you. Excited to, I mean, speak about this somewhat scary topic. As I was mentioned before we started recording, I've owned thousands of residential units over the last 20 years, and thankfully, I've never been a victim. Not that I'm aware of. I've never been a victim of a squatter. I'm sure that we've had some tenants that have maybe made it a little longer through the court system than others. Kind of been able to drag it out in certain
hmm
circumstances, but never was a victim of a true squatter. It's interesting because I had mentioned that to you, and I said, but we also don't own really in any blue states. And I think what we're about to find out here today is that it's not just a blue state problem, how most of us probably think of it is. So with that, I don't want to spoil it for everybody. We'll dive into the granular details. So why don't we start here, George? For those that aren't familiar with you, don't know you, maybe haven't seen your video, don't follow you on social, take a few minutes and fill in the blanks for us. I give you that brief introduction. I know there's a lot more to the story than that. So tell us a little bit more about your background and then really how you found your way into this unique niche in the real estate space.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin. I'm a 20-year real estate veteran as a broker, developer, landlord. I've worn all the different hats in the residential real estate space. And within that time, most of my investing has been in the Portland, Oregon area, that is. I've built multifamily, luxury homes, single family homes, done a ton of house flips. And if you do a lot of business in Portland, Oregon, and you have tenants, you're going to have some run-ins with some bad actors. So what I did was after I'd heard about some friends that were struggling with some squatters, and I've actually had squatters kind of low level myself, but we're really talking about like drug addicts falling asleep inside a house flip or a
Mhm.
construction project, and they'll move along. It's not like the squatters of modern day that have like a full-blown scam going, but I talked to a few friends and they'd had this problem, and I thought, whoa, this is just absurd. So I made a video. It was on Super Bowl Sunday, and it was called I Stole a House. And so what I did was I made a video basically going through the steps that all these squatters take in order to occupy homes in Portland and everywhere else, but really just Portland at that time for prolonged, protracted periods of time and get away with it and not be held criminally liable and to get a bunch of free housing, which around here is expensive. So I pretended to be the squatter. I go through the steps and I upload it to TikTok, and instantly the thing just explodes. My notifications are lighting up like crazy. I'm like refreshing it during the game, and it was one of those things where you swipe down and it just lights up all over again. And it was very short-lived, at least at first, because the video got taken down by TikTok within like an hour or something, really quick. And so I'm like, ah, dang, that's too bad. Well, let's see what happens if I upload it to Meta. So I put it on Meta, same thing happens, totally explodes. Then on X, somebody tags me and says, hey, wait a second, man, is this you? And it had been uploaded by a creator with like millions of followers and reposted. And it was the TikTok video. They'd actually downloaded it before it got taken down, but I wasn't tagged in it. So everybody on there thought that I was actually a squatter. They couldn't click back to my profile and see that I was a real estate guy. I was a developer. Like, I'm on the good side of this thing. So I got all these people on Twitter saying they're going to find me and shoot me and all this stuff. It was wild. So, and then Fox News called, then News Nation called. I ended up going on Dr. Phil, like a Bigger Pockets article
Oh
came
my
out. I
gosh.
just basically rocketed to the center of attention when it came to this issue. And what happened in the wake of this was that everybody and their mother who'd ever had an experience being scammed in the real estate space by squatters or otherwise, they reached out to me and said, "Hey, man, that's crazy that squatting is so bad. I had a squatter. Or, oh, I got scammed this way. And I heard from all of them. And it really made me realize that this is an extremely underserved market. There are people that are losing millions and millions of dollars to scams. The criminals aren't being held accountable. And these investors are either not covered by insurance or insufficiently covered. And they're losing a ton of money. They're losing their shirts, but they're not broadcasting it because it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to get scammed. So I sought to consolidate all this information and make a course on squatters. It's called Squatter Defender. And then title fraud was something I had no idea that even existed, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But title fraud robs investors of their entirety of their home equity in any one single property that they get frauded. It's not covered by title insurance most of the time, and
Hmm.
they don't get the money back and it just disappears. I had no idea it existed, and I had no idea just how easily the crime was perpetrated. So I dug into that. I tried to come up with solutions to that and made Title Fraud Defender. And now I'm on a mission to influence and encourage my fellow investors to protect themselves and not be the next victim.
Awesome. Well, good deal. I appreciate that introduction, George, and a little bit of background. So excited, definitely to dive deep into both those respective topics. So why don't we start with squatting? It sounds like we've got two. Let's bifurcate it down the middle. We have two specific scams that really take place. So let's start with squatting. And you made a reference to a prolonged period of time, like just generally speaking, and I know that there's surely there's variances here, but give me the broad definition of a prolonged period of time. And in my mind, again, like I've had evictions that have taken longer than anticipated. Maybe taken 5 or 6 months, 7 months, which is fairly long in most of the states we own and operate in. Normally if it's pretty black and white, it's 3 months. If and we can get folks out. 6 or 7 months is in my mind a prolonged period of time. What are we talking about here in the professional squatting world?
Good question, Kevin. So, a prolonged period of time for me is longer than a day, but realistically,
Fair enough.
because if they don't have the right to be there and never did, then they should
That's
just
true. That's true. Yeah.
GTFO.
Yeah.
However, we're talking about periods of time that vary pretty significantly state to state because it's a function largely of their landlord-tenant law. Because what the squatters are doing, they're exploiting the landlord-tenant law to gain the rights as tenants. And so that's one reason they're not being held criminally liable for these things is that, you've got a cop who's come there and, basically fooled him with a fake lease and got a he said, she said. So it's like, hey, can't do this criminally. You got to do it in the civil way. So you take him to court. With either ejectment or eviction. Eviction's usually the easiest path. And in some places, you can evict somebody in a matter of weeks, no muss, no fuss. And then in other places, it takes months. And there's a whole lot of things, a lot of T's you got to cross, I's you got to dot. And if you mess up any of those, it resets the process and takes months and months longer. And a lot of times the squatters are advised by lawyers and government agencies, for that matter, who are telling them exactly what to do to prolong that period and juice the landlord for even more time. So, to answer your question more specifically, we're talking about periods in a lot of cases of well over 1 year's time.
Wow. So let's back it up a little bit. So how does this typically occur? So you got a vacant home, home's vacant for whatever reason, but the squatter, they break in, they draft up a BS lease. And then when, the homeowner, determines that they're living there, someone's living in their home, someone broke in their home is living there, they call the police come and, that squatter provides the police officer with a BS lease. Is that essentially what happens? That's how this plays out.
That's about the size of it. And a lot of times they don't
Okay.
even need to have the BS lease like in written form for the police officer because the police officer, and this is red state, blue state, across the board, he's going to be using his discretion to determine whether or not it's a good idea to remove somebody from a home. And the problem is, Kevin, is that possession is 9/10 of the law. The shirt on your back is presumed to be your own unless somebody can prove that it's not. And so if you've got a squatter inside a house and you got a homeowner saying, hey, this guy's not supposed to be here, if the squatter's been given enough time to where he's like moved in furniture, moved in his buddies, he's been out front mowing the lawn, so he's waving to the neighbors, his car's parked in the driveway. Any police officer in any state is going to have to think to themselves, hey, seems to me that there's a legitimate possibility, at least beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this guy might have the right to be here. And we've got an owner here. He's waving his deed around, says, "Hey, like I own this place. This guy's got to leave." There's laws against taking people out of their home if they have the contractual right to be there. So if you've got a guy who, like, if you got a squatter who's done his homework, he's got the, like, you can show a utility bill, he's been there for a while, he's got a fake lease, any of the above, even just belongings moved in, the police officer is going to be less inclined to put his job on the line to withdraw somebody, to pull somebody out of the home and arrest them on suspicion that they might be a squatter just because, like, one guy said that he was, even though there's a lot of proof that he lives there and actually is legitimate. So therein lies the problem.
So I mean, what type of property owner typically falls victim to this? Because I'm thinking that like if I've got a vacant unit, but I got a property management company that's ultimately marketing the home, trying to find a new tenant for it, it's sitting there vacant, but there's someone coming by. There's a third party, a third party service that I've hired that is also aware that the home's vacant. There's a listing up, so like there's a lot of proof there that would ultimately add up to say like, hey, this home is vacant, and Mr. Squatter, like you're legally not allowed to be here. Whereas, is it more along the lines of that, or is it more along the lines of like, I'm Kevin, I live in Florida, but I've got a second home. It's in Portland. I maybe visit it a few times a year. Outside of that, it sits there vacant while I'm spending my time in sunny Florida. And then in that instance, you've got a number of months that ultimately might occur that might come in between either myself or someone else actually visually inspecting or just seeing the home in person. Is that do these squatters go as far as like doing their due diligence and research and identifying the best suited candidates, to basically allow them to execute on their plan?
Yeah, they're looking for the easy ones if they
Okay.
can. But
And what
one
is
of the
the easy?
most
Like in their minds, what's the easy one? Again, just
Well,
trying
the
to.
easy one is so out of state owner. So they look in the tax records, see that the
Okay.
owner's listed as out of state. It's clearly vacant. You got cobwebs, packages piled up. They look inside and there's nobody in there. There's a lot of measures that you can take to make your place not necessarily look like it's unoccupied. But if you're a squatter, yeah, you're looking for the easy game. You're looking for someone who's easy to victimize. But Kevin, one of the most shocking things that I learned when I was researching all this stuff is how it happens to everybody like across the board. It's happened to families who have left on vacation. They'll come back and there will be a family or a guy like
That's crazy.
living in their house and they'll have been gone to Disneyland for a week and there he is. So then they call the cops like, "Hey, get this guy out of here." And he's like, when he gives the whole scam like I've been describing, and the cop says, "Sorry, you got to evict this guy." And they're in their house. It's completely crazy. But more often than not, yeah, it's investors, which is why I love speaking to investors about this stuff because normally, if you're an investor, you got multiple units. Sometimes you got vacancies. Sometimes those vacancies, drag on for a while. A lot of times they're out of state and you've got a vulnerability.
Yeah. So what do we do then? Proactively, what can we do as property owners that inevitably are going to have a vacant unit, sometimes for weeks or months at a time? What do we do proactively? What steps do we need to take in order to avoid this happening and becoming a victim?
So, one big segment of the Squatter Defender training series is the prevention and detection. And that's all the different things you can do to not become a victim of this. And the easiest one by far, and I emphasize it in the course, is it's a real no-brainer. You get a burglar alarm. You just get a simple little burglar alarm that has a motion detector and a camera. And that way, if anybody's going in the place. And what it does, it makes it so that they cannot get established. They don't have enough time because you've got a notification on your phone. You can have the cops come for another 25 bucks a month. But in the Squatter Defender course, I offer a 50% off coupon to Simply Safe. That's what I use. And also comes with a free camera and it's all self-install. You plunk it down. There's no big expensive install. It's like $100 or something with that coupon. And you know when people are coming and going. You pull up the camera, oh, it's the plumber. Okay, no big deal. But if you pull up the camera and it's somebody you don't recognize, they don't have time to get established at that point. So maybe they've already gone through the steps to identify like an out-of-state owner or seen, nobody's coming and going and kind of case the place. But the alarm is kind of like the safeguard. It makes it so you know who's coming and going. You got the notification on your phone, and they don't have time to get established because that is your enemy. Time is of the essence.
what if they proactively, again, just thinking through, trying to, there's some really smart ones out there. What if they proactively, identified the out of state owner property? They know it's got a burglar alarm because it's got, the stickers or the sign in the yard, or, they've cased it out enough to where they know that there's something there. They go ahead and get some utility bills put in their name, maybe sign up for a few magazine subscriptions, and then 2 weeks after the fact, break into this unit, and ultimately the police come after the burglar alarm goes off, and they can say, hey, look, man, I've been here for a couple of weeks. I just don't know what's going on. This thing's on the fritz. It's going off. I don't know what's happening here. But I do live here. Here's my utility bill.
Yeah,
I mean, could that really happen?
that could happen. And so there's measures you can take to keep that specific instance from happening. But what you're doing with each and every one of these things that I recommend in the Squatter Defender course is you're just decreasing the odds little by little with each one. And most of the time, it's actions that are, inexpensive or completely free. And most of the time they're absolutely free. And you can like call the utility company and make sure that utilities aren't taken out of your name, or this person you have like authorized accounts. And then with the fake lease, there's nothing you can do to stop that. But put yourself in the shoes of the police officer. You got one guy saying that he wasn't, that he's never been there or whatever. But then the other guy's saying he has the right to be there. But one guy has video evidence. He's got the guy,
Right.
coming in there, and he probably doesn't have a key. He's probably picking the lock. Everybody and all of your listeners are one YouTube video away from being able to pick a lock. I've tried it myself, and it's not too hard. So if you got video evidence, cops get sent it all the time. I've sent video evidence to cops myself. I'll say, hey, I got a guy here. I got a problem, and I got a video. And he's like, all right, well, text it to this number, and I sent it to him. It's like, okay, yeah, we'll be right there. And that's a normal thing these days. So the better, the more you can lower the odds, the better off you are.
Yeah, that's crazy. Are there any, again, not even just speaking blue to red, but just any parts of the country that this is a truly concentrated issue and problem?
It's everywhere because the police have their hands tied by property
Okay.
possession laws and whatnot everywhere. However, once the squatter gains the rights as a tenant, the bundle of rights that are afforded to a tenant, someone who has the contractual right to occupy a property, it varies state to state, and kicking them out varies state to state. And as you might imagine, red states tend to favor the landlord a little bit more, and blue states tend to favor the tenant a little bit more,
Yep.
sometimes to a crazy extent. And so if you've got a situation where you're having to, if you don't use any of the other, we'll call them alternative or unconventional methods to get your squatter out, and you're going through the court system, you're just going straight down the middle, you're going to have a harder time in a blue state because the tenants have more rights. They've got more opportunity for continuances, dragging the process along because the whole time that the court case is going on, you got the landlord paying the lawyer, paying out the nose, and you've got the squatter that's basically a de facto tenant at this point. So blue state, yeah, they're going to be a little bit kinder to them, even though they shouldn't. That's just how it is.
Yeah, that's crazy. So that's squatter. That's a squatter issue, major issue, across the country. So everyone that's tuning in, obviously, if you got rental properties, be well aware of the scam. I didn't realize it was as prevalent. I made the assumption when we started chatting here, that it was really probably predominantly in blue states. In fact, the ones that come to mind, again, mentioning Portland and Seattle and basically anywhere in California, New York. But it's a national issue. So again, I was not aware of that. I've never personally have dealt with it, but it sounds like the odds might be against my favor at
The
this
odds are
point in
going to
time.
catch up to you sooner or later, man. Sooner or later. And
Yeah,
in those red
yeah,
states, I got a lot of, so unfortunately, this whole thing was very politicized, the going viral thing. And a lot of people said, hey, we don't have this problem in my state because where I am, I just go in there with my shotgun and problem solved. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, well, I mean, yeah, so if someone's trespassing, they're in a house, like, maybe that works. I started consulting with attorneys and saying like, all right, so, what applies here? Then I learned about the castle doctrine, which is basically, in most states, if someone comes into your home, you can unalive them with your pew pew and you're gonna be just fine. You're gonna go off scot-free. But if it's an investment property, it's a little bit different. And if you go in there, literally guns blazing, there's been a lot of documented cases where people have done that exact thing. And in a lot of cases, it's resulted in the not so tragic death of the squatter, but a lot of times in the tragic death of the homeowner. And you're putting yourself, unfortunately, in a really dangerous situation when you do that. When you're escorting them out at gunpoint or threatening them. I've heard people putting up bear traps, booby traps, things like that. There is a lot of cases, unfortunately, where the squatter gets hurt or gets killed, and the homeowner or the whoever set them up to get hurt is held criminally liable, even though they were trespassing. It's like the guy who sued McDonald's after he like fell through the skylight or whatever it was when he was
Yeah.
robbing the place.
You see to become really good friends with a with an exterminator, and then ultimately have them write a bill that you've got, an infestation of termites and have to tend to home.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's
Yeah,
actually one thing, the one that I didn't hear. Heard pouring cockroaches down the chimney, snakes, rats, and mice also. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. If you
there's
got an
a,
infestation, give whatever the adequate notice is that, hey, we're going to tent this home, and you got to basically move or vacate for a period of time. Anyway, no, that's it's just crazy. I'm just baffled that this is a thing. I can't wrap my mind around. I don't understand the mentality of someone that would go down this route. Because interestingly enough, the folks that are really professional squatters, like they actually have a brain. I mean, they're I mean intelligent, but they're using their intelligence in the wrong manner, right? And I've always thought along lines of like if you truly are willing to put the time, effort, and resources into doing something wrong, then you can surely do it right and probably do just fine in life, right? Not have to actually steal to make your way. So again, I can't understand it.
I
Hard
can't
to
either, man.
just
But one
yeah.
thing that really became clear as I researched this stuff is there's a lot of people that have
Yeah.
that mindset, and it's not, and not only that, Kevin, but it's also not just your low life degenerate drug addict type people that you would think. There are white collar people that have jobs at technology companies who do this basically professionally. There's a guy up in Seattle. He's been a serial squatter, they call him. He goes into $2 million homes and does his scam. He's actually extracted money out of taxpayer funded housing justice organizations and not only had gotten free rent in a luxury home, but also been paid to give money to his landlord, which he kept. So
He's done this multiple times and it
he's
and
done this multiple times.
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I kid you not.
Crazy, crazy. Well, would love to so that's crazy. Again, just anyway, just for those that want to learn more, we're gonna at the very end, you'll make sure that we that George shares all the different resources and services that he offers. We'll put it in the show notes as well. But before we wrap this thing up, George, we'd love to also that was I mean that's one of the scams that exist out there, but the other being deed fraud and in full transparency, I did not do any research on this, so I'm coming into this somewhat blind. I'm a neophyte, don't fully understand or comprehend what that scam is or what it relates to of as far as the deed itself of a property. So maybe let's start with the beginning. What is this scam and what does it consist of?
Yeah, so you're not unlike the vast majority of the population, Kevin, in that you had never heard of this and are unfamiliar with this scam. And I hadn't either until I started fielding all these emails, texts, and phone calls from people that had been victims of real estate fraud and scams like squatters. And one of the most insidious, actually, probably the most insidious that I heard about was deed fraud. And so I was like, well, what the heck is that? And so I started looking into it. But it's basically when you've got your property titled in Kevin LLC or in your name, and a scammer forges a deed and he takes it to the recorder's office. They've got the grantor, got the grantee, he's got a notarized signature because the only security measure on this document is a notary stamp, a rubber stamp, which is very easily forged. It's not a $100 bill. It's not a treasury note. It's just a rubber stamp. So they take it to the recorder's office. It's got all the stuff it needs, got all the signatures, and transfers your property that's in Kevin LLC to a fake name. They've stolen an identity off the dark web and put a picture with their picture of the stolen identity with the social security number and everything. So now that property that used to belong to you is now titled to them. So then what do? They call up a realtor or a wholesaler or, put it on the internet, say, hey, I'm selling this place. The easy one is the wholesaler because those guys,
Yeah.
they can close
Pay
quick.
cash. Yep.
Pay cash, close quick, and you can say, hey, no, don't assign it, don't bring any more ink and paper into this. Just like you got to buy it. And if you're buying a $300,000 house for 200 grand, like yeah, a wholesaler is going to buy that for sure. So so the scammer sells it to the wholesaler, opens up title and escrow. Title and escrow opens it up, sees that the deed transferred just like a month ago. It's like, okay, well, that's normal. Looks like he's selling it for $5,000 profit or something. Okay, seems like he's happy. The wholesaler's happy. I think we're good to go. So then the scammer gets visited by a notary because the title company sends him and sends it to him. His license is a perfect match, and he signs on the property. And the bank account, which he also gets off the dark web from the person who he identity thefted. Then he gets the money wired to that bank account, makes off with that 200 grand, lickety split.
Wow.
Yeah,
Just like that.
just like that. And
I mean, how
there's a
many of these
guy
cases like a year truly occur? I mean, just
about
any
10,000.
data? Really?
Yeah. So the FBI tracks this stuff, but not this crime specifically. But in the course of my research, I ended up speaking with like the preeminent deed fraud lawyer in the entire country. And I was like, all right, man, FBI tabulates this stuff, and there's like something like 200,000, real estate related fraud cases. How many of them are deed fraud? He's like, it's a smaller percentage than you would think, but it's increasing. It was like 1,000 a few years ago. Then it was 2,000. Then it was 5,000. Now it's 10,000. Now it's increasing more and more and more as people are figuring out just how easy and how perfect a crime this is. So even though there's only 10,000 cases a year, which actually sounds like a pretty high number, there's a lot of room for a lot of room to run because there's no like hard and fast solution. And the worst part about it is that, once you realize what happened, you're like, oh my gosh, my place got stolen. You call up your title insurance company and say, like, yo, I just got frauded to the tune of like all of my equity. Help, like, help me out here. And they're gonna say, oh, Kevin, so here's the thing. You have an Alta owner's policy, which is, look at your HUD. Chances are that's the policy that you have. That's what they're hawking usually. And that covers you from the date of the policy, which is the date you bought the place, back in 2011 or whatever, and back in time, not forward in time.
Mm-hmm.
You would need a separate policy called an Alta homeowners policy. And that's a completely different policy. It's much more expensive, as you might guess. It's in the thousands. And then you would have coverage for fraud and impersonation from the policy date forward. So you would have coverage then, but chances are you don't own that policy. So that's when you think to yourself, oh no.
Interesting. Yeah. And I mean, and any additional recourse from there?
Well, from there, you file a quiet title action with an attorney because it's not as something as simple as you call the district attorney, you call the cops, you get everybody on the case, but ultimately you got to put the title back in your name and try and recover your equity. So if somebody bought the place, then there's been actually cases of people that like the end buyer, it gets sold to a wholesaler or to another end buyer or whatever. The end buyer has bought like vacant land and then developed on it and like built a
Oh my
house.
gosh. Wow.
So then you have an absolute nightmare scenario. So it's a big legal entanglement from there on out.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Again,
So
the solution, what proactively, what do we do as homeowners, property owners to avoid this type of nightmare?
So the only real thing that you can do is to know when your property title changes hands. Because once the property title changes hands to somebody else, that's when they can do things with it. You can't prevent them from forging the deed. You can't prevent them from getting a fake stamp, taking it down to the recorder's office and recording it. That to change that would take just a fundamental change across every county in the
Right.
United States.
Right.
And maybe they'll put it on blockchain one day. I've heard like some ideas floated. Nothing's caught on yet. The every county that I've ever talked to or heard about is doing just the notary stamp grant or grantee simple deed. But what you can do is that's why I started Title Fraud Defender. You can go every morning and refresh a page on your county that says, yep, it's still in Kevin LLC. Good to go. I'll start my day now. And then the next day, do the same. Nobody wants to do that. So I wrote some software. I hired some developers to build some software that checks it for you every single day. And if anything is wrong, it tells you right away. It says, "Hey, Kevin, just so you know, it's this thing got transferred. Did you sell the place? Did you giving it to your mom? What's going on?" And if you didn't, you're going to be like, "Oh, I should look into this," and you know about it right away. And if you know about it right away, then you call the title company, say, don't transfer this deed to anybody else. You file an affidavit with the county. You take measures to make sure that you're not going to lose your equity, because that's what matters. It's the money. It's the money that hurts in this.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of the counties, like the larger counties throughout the U.S., probably are, maybe it's not real time, but there's probably a certain, time frame from the time it physically gets, the D gets changed, gets recorded a new name, that it actually makes its way to their digital platform. But how about those counties where I'm sure there's a delay? I mean, I'm sure there's some counties that throughout the country that might be days, weeks, maybe even months of a delay before that might trigger the software. Does that exist? Is that a problem?
Yeah, it is a problem. And luckily, counties right now have been put on notice. There's basically there's no way, like I said, to stop the deed fraud from happening.
Yeah.
But if counties are much more diligently updating their records, there's much less chance that they'll be frauded. And a lot of counties actually have implemented a service that's pretty much identical to Title Fraud Defender. In fact, if you're a county, we'd love to talk to you and just instead of having you write it. But government moves, as we know, glacially. And so most of them haven't implemented software that they've either read themselves or gone from somewhere else. But they've been put on notice that these delays can result in really catastrophic fraud. So if it's not happening in your county, I encourage you to tell them that they need to make it snappy and get to updating their electronic records. So it's better now than it ever has been, because these are the people that are fielding these complaints. And a lot of times these counties are run by, like, two ladies in their 70s, and they're not as adept at this sort of thing. But when one of their constituents, one of their residents, loses all their home equity, then
Yeah.
that becomes a little bit more important.
Absolutely. Well, this is absolutely crazy, George. I appreciate you coming on here and sharing this intel. First time that I've ever had this topic discussed on the show. So appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge that you have on both these respective topics, and one that are, again, very applicable and should be of a concern to pretty much everyone's probably tuning into this, whether you own property today or you intend to own property, whether it be a primary or a investment property. It's surely something to be aware of. I know you have you've mentioned it a few different times during the show, some different resources and services that you provide to help protect folks from these two different scams. Please share some more details if you would, and how can folks find out more about those services as well as get in contact with you?
Totally, yeah. So I'm pretty easy to find on social. You can just search for George McCleary or McCleary Realty and Development. And the name of the companies that I started to help people with these type of scams are Squatter Defender. That's at squatterdefender.com. And that is a course that you can finish in an afternoon. And it'll teach you everything you'll need to know about squatting. That's the conventional and unconventional methods of removal, prevention, detection, all of it. By the end of it, you'll know more about squatting than anybody you know, including your lawyer. And that's at $199. But I've got a coupon code for listeners of this show. That coupon code is Kevin B, and that will get you 20% off. And then the software, the title monitoring software, it's really great for investors because there's other companies in this space, but they'll charge you like 10 or 20 bucks a month to monitor a single title. If you monitor multiple titles, it ranges from like $2 to $5 per month for Title Fraud Defender, and that is the title monitoring software. And that also has that same discount code, Kevin B. It'll get you 20% off for life. So 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, you always got that 20% off, and you can rest assured that all the equity that you have is going to remain safe.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, George, I appreciate you coming on the show, my friend. It's been a lot of fun talking with you. And again, hopefully everyone that's listening here does not encounter this, but should you, now you have a resource and an expert in this particular field that can help you out. So with that, my friend, I appreciate it and wish you all the best.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kevin.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have for this week's show. So until we meet again next week, this is your host, Kevin Bupp, wishing you huge success. Take care now.